It is true that liberals want government to play a bigger role in the economy than conservatives do.
Weird to hear him admit that, considering that in literally any other video, any form of government involvement in the economy would be totalitarian, top-down USSR Venezuelan socialism. Hey folks, welcome back. New house, same Piley, same of everyone's favorite political game show, PragerU, the Got to Be Kidding Me. The rules of this game show are simple. I have a dartboard. In a moment here, I'm going to throw some darty boys at this boardy boo, and whichever number it lands on corresponds to a specific PragerU video, which I've never seen, on a master list. And I will take the time here with my live YouTube chat and we'll react to the PragerU video. Hope those rules made sense. Now let's turn it on over to Dartboard, Piley. Ya boy's back. And here we go. Oh, this time for real. Third time's the charm. Ah, that's not on the board. Oh, okay, I don't know how well that shows up on camera. That is smack dab in between 11 and 14. So I guess I'll see what's on 11 and 14, and I'll pick whichever one's my favorite. All right, folks, the dartboard has spoken. The video we'll be watching today is titled Left or Liberal. So, without further ado, let's turn it back on over to Reaction Room, Piley. Whee! Whew, that was an adventure, let me tell you. Whenever Dartboard Piley's in here, I go into a form of purgatory. But anyways, let's not dwell too much on that. Let's get to today's reaction video.
What's the difference between a liberal and a leftist? This question stumps most people.
Because people like you blur the lines and say anyone to the left of Mitt Romney is a part of a socialist popular front. That's why they're confused.
Because they think liberal and left are essentially the same. But they're not. But the left has appropriated the word liberal so effectively.
It's actually a nefarious plot by socialists to appropriate this good-spirited word. It's definitely their fault. There's definitely no one else involved in this process.
Let me offer you 6 examples. 1. Race. The liberal position on race has always been A, the color of a person's skin is insignificant, and B, those who believe race is significant are racists. Meanwhile,
This is a PragerU tale as old as time. The idea that acknowledging the role race plays in society makes you a racist. And to unpack the straw man argument for somebody who maybe hasn't run across this counter argument before, leftists agree that ideally a person's skin tone should be insignificant. What they would argue the difference, though, is that we are not currently at that place. That is objectively a goal of socialists. Well, I guess I should say most socialists. You know, socialists are not free from being racist. But generally speaking, this is their goal, and it has been ever since the fact that, you know, most civil rights movements in modern history have been led in part by socialists. But them acknowledging systemic barriers to true equality and trying to change those is not a sign that they think race is an important determination of one's character or anything like that. It's a really weird straw man that gets made a lot.
2. Capitalism. Liberals have always been pro-capitalism because liberals are committed to free enterprise. It is true that liberals want government to play a bigger role in the economy than conservatives do.
Weird to hear him admit that, considering that in literally any other video, any form of government involvement in the economy would be totalitarian, top-down USSR Venezuelan socialism.
But liberals never opposed capitalism, and they were never for socialism. Opposition to capitalism and advocacy of socialism are left-wing values.
again, he's not wrong here. I'm just really curious where he draws the line between opposition to capitalism and favorability towards capitalism. Like, at what point for him is regulation suddenly communism, you know? Because you could pull this from his particular context and say, yeah, this here describes Joe Biden. But I have a pretty good idea that he would probably call Joe Biden or somebody like an Obama a radical socialist. So like, I just don't, he's not saying anything, at least right here on this screen, incorrect. I just know for his definition of who's liberal or not is probably out of whack.
3. Nationalism. Liberals believe in the nation state, whether that nation is the United States, Brazil, or France.
Oh, that's weird. That's really interesting. I would have thought that when he brought up nationalism, he would discuss like the way that like communist China or the USSR relied on nationalism and maybe how that was different from liberalism. I'm gonna rewind. I didn't expect him to go this route. Oh, but now he's probably just gonna actually say that socialists believe in the anarchy of no borders, no countries.
But because the left divides the world by class rather than by national identity, the left has always opposed nationalism.
This is such a weird straw man. Like, this isn't at all true. I don't have it on this computer at the moment, but there's this really interesting photo from a Communist Party of America rally from like 1932 that on the stage, you know, behind the speakers at this conference, you have these two relatively small photos of Lenin and Stalin. Way bigger than both of those in the back is this giant, beautiful relief of Abraham Lincoln, which is nothing but an attempt to draw a sort of national identity in the American proletariat. And again, plenty of communist revolutions are very proud of their countries.
While liberals have always wanted to protect American sovereignty and borders, the left is for open borders.
For as much as conservatives strawman socialism or leftism, which is of course a very, very broad field of thought as a state-oriented ideology, it's really funny here, and it warms my heart that they're finally giving anarchism a shot. You know, they're finally acknowledging the work of theorists in sort of the, you know, border abolition field of anarchism. That's nice to see.
4. View of America. Liberals have always venerated America.
I know for a fact. I beg you, there are probably dozens, I'm sure Dennis Prager has had dozens of these clips. There are, without a doubt, thousands of Rush Limbaugh clips of him calling liberals un-American and that shit. This is such a weird concession that he would never make in like any other video.
Watch American films from the 1930s through the 1950s.
Oh, when there was government regulation that you couldn't say certain things in movies? When there was a restriction on freedom of speech enforcing shitty conservative values? Yeah, the movies are gonna look a little different. That's not a good thing.
You will be watching overtly patriotic, America-celebrating films.
Yes, patriotic films, a thing which famously ended in the 1950s. Hard cut to, I don't know, Transformers footage or some shit. I was gonna say, any American sniper type movie, anything about soldiers is pretty overtly patriotic. Also, shit like Red Dawn and Rocky with the 4, whichever one he fights the Russian in, like, we have continued to be patriotic well past the 50s, I assure you.
5. Free speech. No one has been more committed than American liberals to the famous statement, "I wholly disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it."
Hey folks, Editing Piley here. Wanted to hop in to remind folks of the long-standing American tradition of liberals joining with conservatives to suppress the speech of left-wing movements. As I discussed in my Seattle General Strike video, liberal outlets like the New York Times cheered on the deportation of socialists during and right after World War I. Like, liberals were almost as involved in the Red Scares as conservatives. So while, as we'll get into in a minute, conservatives, have their own unique moments of canceling speech in their movement's history, I just wanted to bring up that it's very telling he conveniently forgets the times that liberals have been very in favor of suppressing speech, because coincidentally, it's all when it comes down to stopping leftward movements in the country. Weird that he would do that. Anyways, back to the video.
But the left is leading the first widespread suppression of free speech in modern American history.
But aside from the historical role conservatives play in censoring socialists, just hard cut to footage of the Dixie Chicks getting canceled by conservatives for saying they didn't really approve of George Bush that much. While at the same time, some of their pastors are encouraging people to literally burn books in the forest. Hey folks, Editing Piley again. Just wanted to point out that there's one political party passing laws that dictate which types of speech are acceptable and which are un-American and therefore must be banned in schools. I wonder where that's coming from.
Of course, the left claims to only oppose hate speech. But putting aside the fact that the left deems hate speech anything it differs with,
Dennis Prager, I beg you to answer the question. If a socialist was on Twitter and they saw somebody say, hey, I think the corporate tax rate should be 23%, and this socialist disagrees and thinks, let's say they're a democratic socialist, and they think the corporate tax rate should be like 50%. That is a thing they disagree with. They do not agree with that position. Oh, weird, that's not a thing people report for hate speech? I like to use the corporate tax rate as a counterexample to the narrative that liberals and lefties are just trying to cancel things they disagree with, because that is a thing they disagree with, but that would never be considered hate speech in like any Twitter space or anything like that. Rather, the things that are considered hate speech, being homophobic, being transphobic, hating on other religions, are reported as hate speech because I would like to think we could agree that that is considered hate speech. And the problem is that those things seem to be really mainstream up until the point that you have one of the largest candidates in the Republican Senate race in Pennsylvania having tweeted that Islam is the religion of pedos. Were that tweet to be reported, is it because those triggered libs just can't handle disagreements? Or is it the fact that there is a slow and frightening naturalization of bigoted rhetoric on the right? But the way he's framing it here is to just say, they don't agree with things. That's why they're trying to get rid of them, which does ignore like the material harm of like being transphobic or homophobic or shit like that. 6. Western civilization. Liberals have always championed Western civilization. He's right, and that's a problem. But moreover, my favorite counter-argument to any bullshit about the glory of Western civilization, like there's that great poll, about a Gallup poll or something, where they said, do you think Arabic numerals should be taught in school? And I forget the number, but there was a significant chunk of people that said, no, I don't want them taught in school. And that's just numbers, motherfucker, because there were contributions throughout all of human history. Scientific, mathematic, cultural, philosophical contributions have come from plenty of places other than the West. The only reason we in this moment have this sort of dominance of Western culture really is just because of how good they got at fighting wars, Like they for sure had artistic, philosophical renaissances, and all that shit is great. But the reason other spheres of cultural influence aren't sort of the zeitgeist has nothing to do with them having weaker cultures. It's just about like who, won out. Thank you, Uber. That's a great point. I was just about to say. American democracy, or what we might recognize as like a federal versus state system, had been developed by the Iroquois nation centuries before America existed, which makes it predate even other European democracies. And like cities in South America had some like urban development that vastly exceeded what the Europeans had at the time. So arguments about Western versus other cultures has nothing to do with like the actual merits of being better. It's just celebrating those who were the most dominant in war, The most revered liberal in American political history, President Franklin Roosevelt. Wait, he's a liberal here? I'm really fucking confused. I know for a fact that in any other conservative conversation, FDR is the scariest totalitarian communist that America has ever seen. This is fucking bizarre.
They argue that Western civilization is no better than any other, and that Western civilization is just a euphemism for white supremacy.
You can tell that this argument he's trying to say is ludicrous is absolutely true when you confront a certain section of conservatives with an all-inclusive European history. Like, just show the reactions to the times that, like, a black person or an Asian person was cast in like a BBC medieval period piece, and like people freak out like, this is just the wokes getting in and pushing their agenda, they're destroying Western civilization. And then you come to find out that, like, yeah, there was a black guy on the Knights of the Round Table. So it's almost like people aren't actually concerned with the history of the West, and are just concerned with the people they have built up in their head as supposedly occupying those spaces. Also, I just feel like you need to point out, rarely do you see anybody hype up Western civilization without them using it to like talk shit on like Muslims or Asians or some other culture that just so happens to not have a lot of white people.
Dear liberals, conservatives are not your enemy. The left is.
Once again, he's not wrong. It is so funny to hear him acknowledging this. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the PragerU video, everyone. In summary though, for as many PragerU videos as I've watched for this channel, this is one of the more confusing. It's also one of the least incorrect, which is I think part of why it's throwing me for a loop. Because he's not wrong when he says things that like conservatives have more in common with liberals. He's not wrong when he says that like liberals are very nationalistic and liberals are in favor of capitalism. It's just weird to hear him, or it would be weird to hear really any conservative delivering this message. Ideologically, consistency-wise, it throws me off because I just know for a goddamn fact that there are plenty of other scenarios where Dennis Prager or any other conservative basically make liberalism and leftism interchangeable, you know? So it's really confusing in that sense to have him concede some otherwise reasonable points, but those reasonable points are probably in service of an unreasonable end goal and are probably not ideologically consistent across all of his segments. But anyways, that'll be it for this video, everybody. Hope you enjoyed my return to the series in my new room. Now, let's turn it on over to the pre-recorded outro. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to toss me a like and subscribe down below. But if you really want to help me out, you can join me over on Patreon. Patrons get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, like early versions of every video, and exclusive Patreon-only videos. Plus, if you join the Piley Benton's Biggest Boys tier, you get your name read off at the end of every video. Zoth, Revo Pregame, Emily, Kyle Foley, Jennifer Jones, Caffeine Unicorn, Goblin of the Year, and Cameron Fordo. So if you want to hear your lovely name read off at the end of every video, be sure to join me on this specific tier. Thanks much, everyone, and I'll see you next time.